Allison. Welcome to my YouTube channel and welcome to a special video because this is a video that originally aired on the Spellbinders YouTube channel. They asked me to open up day 12 of the Advent calendar, and I think I mentioned a few weeks ago that I would be sharing some cards that I made with the Stitchmas calendar, and so here we are. I do have a spoiler alert here in case any of you are planning on ordering this Advent calendar and you don't want to be surprised by the contents. So if you do want to be surprised, I suggest you stop watching this video and rewatch it when you do open up window 12. So here we go. I'm going to open it up and there is a sneak of what we're going to find inside. So I'm going to take the die set out and see what we have. So we have the main body outline, parts for the wing, a tail, and the stitching pieces that go inside of those. And then we have a piece that creates the feet and some facial features, as well as a piece to create a little branch with berries. And here is a peek at the first card that I'll be making today. This card uses only contents of the Advent calendar itself and the Stitch Along add-on kit. Now I am going to bring in just 2 extra colors of cardstock, including this berry pink, which is from the Meadow collection. That's the color in front. And I think it looks really pretty with the dahlia from the kit, as well as a darker pink shade of floss from the add-on kit. So we're going to start with some die cutting, and I'm going to cut the body from that berry pink color, and then the smaller parts with the dahlia color. And I'm including the dies that add the stitching detail. It's just easier to die cut it with those right inside the outline dies. I'm using my best ever craft tape to hold those in place. And then I'm going to be using my new little Scout, which is perfect for cutting smaller dies like this. This little machine is small but mighty. I'm really loving it. All right, so now that we have the pieces cut out, I did cut the tail from both colors because I wasn't sure at the time which one I was going to go with. So I like to have options. And so here's kind of what the bird is going to look like. Now I also happen to have a second piece for each body part that I had already cut. I hadn't settled on my final color combination yet, so I had these extra pieces. So I'll just use those to glue behind these pieces. Now I don't normally use 2 layers to stitch with when I use heavy cardstock like this, but I had them anyway, so I used them. Now adding a second layer behind the main body of the bird also allows me to easily add in the eye, and I'll show you how I do that on my second card. But for now, I'm actually going to go ahead and assemble this little guy before I start stitching. So there's a little eyeball, and this little black piece adds some definition for the face. So once you put that on, you can really see the bird coming together. And again, these pieces I am just doubling up. I could have saved them for another one because really I almost never double up my pieces when I stitch. Now here are the legs, and this is why I decided to assemble the bird before stitching. First, I'm going to make sure that I don't cover up any of the stitching holes when I glue the legs on. You can see that here. And because stitching can add bulk to the back of the die cut, I figured it would be easier to glue the legs on beforehand. I'm using my Barely Art glue for all of my assembly today. And I use the fine tip, which just makes it so easy to adhere smaller pieces. So there are the legs. And again, I made sure to avoid covering those holes. Now I am using the darker pink floss from the add-on kit, and I'm going to pull enough length to stitch all 3 pieces here. That way I only need to thread my needle once. And when I thread, I usually use 3 strands of floss. The floss comes as 6 strands, so I'm just going to separate them. And I'm using a needle from the add-on kit. Now you can use a needle threader, but I was lucky enough to get this through on my first try, which is very rare. Now I'm using washi tape today to help hold the floss on the back of my die cuts. This is just washi tape that I keep with all of my stitching supplies, but you can also use the Spellbinders Best Ever Craft tape, that tape that I had used for die cutting before. And now you'll notice that when I started, I came up through one of the outer holes, and then I will go down through that middle hole. I like to do my stitching this way, but it doesn't really matter which way you go. This is just really easy, basic stitching. So I will just go all the way around until I fill all of those outer holes, again coming up through the outer holes and back down into the center. And I just need to make sure that I'm not getting caught up on the bird's legs. So just really easy, basic stitching here. And once I'm done, I'm just going to snip that thread, and then I'll use that same piece of washi from the beginning to hold both ends of the floss. There really wasn't a need to use a second piece of washi tape here. All right, so here he is. And I love kind of the tone-on-tone look. All right, so I have the leftover floss to continue with the other pieces, and I'll do the tail next. I'll use a tiny piece of washi tape to secure the loose end. And again, I will start from one of the outer holes. Again, it really doesn't matter. It's all going to look the same. So again, once I am done with that, I can secure that loose end and cut it off. Now I have just enough floss left to stitch the wing, and because this piece is so small, I'm just going to hold that loose piece of thread while I stitch. There's really just not enough room to put a piece of tape on the back and be able to stitch through all those holes. But holding that loose thread is pretty easy. And again, whenever I thread, I'm holding the last stitch kind of taut with my thumb and my index finger. And so now that I'm done, I'm going to use my glue to adhere the stitched pieces together. So this piece is going to go onto the larger part of the wing. And I'll put my large acrylic block on top while it dries. Now I cut the beak from Spellbinders Persimmon Cardstock, and it was at this point that I decided to include that orange in the color palette of my cards. I really like using non-traditional colors for my holiday cards, especially because I make a lot of holiday cards, so it's nice to mix things up once in a while. And by the way, I brought this little white piece from the Advent calendar just to put behind my bird while I did my final assembly. Sometimes it's just easier to see things on a white surface rather than my black craft mat. And again, I'll use that acrylic block to hold it in place. Now for the first card, I am bringing in a few elements from day 8, including the pine leaf die. You can see that I already stitched it with the darker turquoise floss from the add-on kit. And now you can see here that I've stepped things up a bit with this second leaf. And I'll show you how I did that. I'm using that lighter shade of blue floss from the add-on kit. And without thinking, I had used all 6 strands when I was testing this out on the first leaf, so I'm just going to do that for the others as well. I wouldn't normally use 6 strands of floss, especially when I already have another color floss in there, but you know, it worked. Now I already have enough going on the back of this die, so instead of adding more tape to the back, I'm just holding that loose end again. Now as I pull the thread down through the hole, I'm going to pause on tightening it so that I can kind of pull that darker blue floss up. Basically, I'm trying not to cover up all of the darker color with this lighter color. If I were to just stitch as normal, you would only see the lighter color, especially because I did use 6 strands of it. So again, I'm just using my needle to pull that blue floss up enough to where you can kind of see it. And I've zoomed in a little bit so you can see better what I am doing. And you'll see it on my finished card as well. You'll see the detail that this brings. So again, just showing you what I'm doing. And now this wasn't any special kind of stitch I'm doing. It's just something I thought of because I wanted to add a little more texture to these leaves. And I also thought it toned down the contrast between the darker floss and that waterfall cardstock. So once I'm done, secure it to the back with the washi, and I have 3 leaves. Now off camera, I had die cut all of my other elements. You'll see that I pulled in the poinsettia from day 8, and the berries come with the bird for day 12. So I'm trying to get a good idea of the final layout of my card because I want to first stamp a sentiment directly onto that white card panel. And by the way, I cut this panel using the brand new Perfect Touch rectangles and tag set. I believe this was the second largest die in that set that I used. So I'm putting everything in my MISTI on my grip mat. And here is the stamp set that is exclusive to the Stitch Along add-on kit. And I'm going to use the stamp that says Peace, Love, Joy. So once I determine where I want the stamp to go, I can remove all of the die cuts and stamp the sentiment. And I am using just black pigment ink for both of my cards today. And there we go. Now let's start assembling the card. I have a piece of waterfall cardstock cut to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches, and I'm gluing a slightly smaller panel of the teal turquoise. And now I can just glue this onto a white A2 card base. Now I could have made a card base out of that waterfall cardstock, but this is just a way to save your colored cardstock. And now I can place my white panel on top of there. Now both of those blue colors come in the add-on kit. And all right, you'll see that I added some double-sided tape to the back of my leaves. I think I got this tape in a Spellbinders kit of some sort last year, but any double-sided tape will do. And again, I'm just trying to get an idea of how I want things positioned before I start securing anything down. Now normally I use foam tape on the back of pieces that have this much stitching, but I need to add this leaf to the bottom of my arrangement, so I really didn't want to start off with that much bulk. So for this second leaf, I'm going to just use that double-sided tape as well. And right now the bird is loose. And sadly the legs have to go. And I do think this bird is so adorable with the legs, but he really didn't need the legs. And here you can see that I am using some foam squares for this last leaf. So I'm going to tuck part of it underneath the bird, and then I realized that I had forgotten to pull off the release tape. That always helps. So there we go. So now that is secured down. More foam squares for the bird, along with just a little bit of glue at the bottom where he will be sitting on top of some of the leaves. And those orange flowers are still loose. So now I can put those down. I have a tiny piece of foam on this poinsettia for the part that will actually sit on top of the white panel. And I'm going to tuck this under the wing. And then this one I can just glue down. And I'm only gluing the center just so the petals can kind of stick up and create some dimension. Now this little leaf comes from the day 8 set, the same set that I pulled the pine leaves and poinsettia from. And these berries come with the bird. And you'll see I snipped one of the leaves off so that I could tuck this in under that larger stitched leaf. I do that a lot. I snip where I need to. Now I'm finishing things up with some of the Fashion Oyster Pearl embellishments that come in the add-on kit. And there we go. We have a finished card. And I think it's really beautiful. I love the colors. These are some of my happy colors. So here we go. You can see the detail in those leaves that I was talking about. And here we go. Here is the second card that we are going to make. For this card, I am using letters from the Stitched Alphabet collection. These darker pieces were cut using the shadow layer dies, and then these dies cut the detail letters with the stitching holes. but just because you have stitching holes doesn't mean that you have to stitch them, right? So I'm going to try to remove this die without too many of those tiny little pieces coming out. And now I'm putting some tape, just regular tape, on the back of the die cut where all of those holes are. This will keep those tiny round pieces in place, and any pieces that came out or that are still on the die itself, I can just add back in with my embellishment wand. So it's kind of just like die cut inlay where I'm just adding those back in. And remember, there's tape at the back, so the tape is holding those pieces in place. So there we go. And here it is on its shadow layer, and I love how that looks. All right, so now I have all my bird pieces cut out using the same colors as before, this time in reverse. And here's where I'm going to show you how I put eyes into little critters like this. So I put a little piece of tape on the back of the back layer, and then I can use my embellishment wand to place the eye in there. And again, it's being held in there with the tape. And then I can just glue the second piece on top. Easy peasy. So just like I did with the letters, I am not going to stitch this bird. I think it's important to stretch your dies and to understand that just because it's a stitching die doesn't mean that you have to stitch it, right? I think that the stitching holes just add interest and texture to the bird. And especially having the bottom layer color show through the holes just helps with that. I know I didn't do that on the letters, but the reason I didn't do it on the letters is because I wanted them to have a little less contrast. Now with the tail piece, I'm going to let a little bit of that bottom layer peek out at the top just for a little more detail. All right, I'm going to pause here really quick. Off camera, I've already created my card base and panel similar to the first one, but now the teal turquoise, that darker color, is the larger piece. And I use that same stamp set for the sentiment, again with black pigment ink. You'll see that I've added some foam squares to the back of the letters. And there are some areas of the letters where I was careful not to put the foam too close to the edge because I'm going to be tucking things into those areas. So once I'm ready to add the letters to the card base, I'm going to use my reverse tweezers and my T-square ruler just to help make sure that I get them on there nice and straight. And then you can see with the O and the J how I use my T-square ruler to make sure it's straight vertically, not just horizontally. And it was about this point where I realized I'm not crazy about the spacing and position of that O. So here comes my craft knife to the rescue. That will just help me pull up that foam tape underneath, and then I can secure it back down, and I'm just eyeballing it this time. Now you'll see at the top of the screen that I have a lot of little die cuts. Basically, I had gone diving into my Spellbinders Christmas stash to find all sorts of little foliage pieces. I get a lot of use out of my older sets this way. And this little branch that I cut from the Persimmon Cardstock is from the Build-A-Wreath set. And I'm going to create kind of a little nest for my bird to sit in. That Build-A-Wreath set was, I believe, from last year. And it had a bunch of other die sets to go along with it. And I really enjoyed using those. So I'm happy to be using that set again. So just simple assembly with some glue. Now I'm attaching my bird with some foam squares, and I thought it was just a cute idea to have him in the middle of the O. Now I'm going to add a little branch kind of in front of him but tucked under the wing, just to build up the idea of a nest a little bit more. And again, I'm loving this orange color. Now here come all those little pieces. This pine branch is from the Delivering Joy Sleigh that just came out last month. And the berries are from the Parcel and Post Christmas Decorations set. And I think this little blue leaf is also from that Delivering Joy Sleigh. Now the little orange flower came from my stash of Spellbinders bits and pieces that I keep in a little container. Whenever I have unused pieces from a project, I put them in a container to use for purposes like this. And if you've watched any of my videos, you know I don't like throwing anything away. Now these pieces at the top are the same pieces from the advent calendar that I used on the first card, except for obviously this little pine branch. But the poinsettia, these berries, and that leaf, same ones that I used on the first card. Now here I decided that the bird needed a fluffier nest, so I'm just going to add another little branch to keep him nice and cozy. I could have kept adding little branches, but I haven't learned when to say when, but sometimes I know when to say when. Now, just like with the first card, I'm going to embellish this one with those oyster pearls from the add-on kit. And I'm actually placing them in the center of those stitching holes in the letters. So I thought that added a little bit of fun interest to the letters. And then I will scatter a few of those little pearls here and there on the white panel itself. And finally, I decided to add a little highlight to the berries using a white gel pen. There is a very slight indentation on the berries where a highlight would go. And this is when I decided to go back to my first card to add that same highlight to those berries. And here we are with both cards. One stitch and one knot. And I love them both. So here is kind of a close-up of that second card. And I love him in his little nest. And again, this first card was stitched and used only contents from the advent calendar and the add-on kit. And I enjoyed making both of these. I hope that if you learned anything today, you learned to stretch the use of your dies. Just because it's a stitching die doesn't mean you need to stitch with it. And that is it for me today. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate having you here. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.